The studio lights dimmed as 20 million Americans witnessed something they never expected to see. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, standing on America's most watched television program with tears streaming down his face. August 14th, 1958, Memphis, Tennessee, 3:17 a.m. The phone rang at Graceland, cutting through the thick Mississippi summer heat like a knife. Elvis had been expecting this call, dreading it, but nothing could have prepared him for the voice on the other end. Dr. Charles Clark, from Baptist Memorial Hospital, spoke slowly, carefully. "Elvis, you need to come now. Your mother—" The line went dead. Elvis dropped the receiver. Gladys Love Presley had been his anchor, his compass, his entire world wrapped up in one fierce, protective woman who had never let him forget where he came from. For 23 years, she had been the only person who could quiet the storm inside him, the only voice that could cut through the chaos of fame and bring him back to earth. Now she was gone. But what happened in the next 48 hours would reveal something about Elvis Presley that even his closest friends had never seen. Something that would challenge everything America thought it knew about the man behind the legend. Elvis arrived at the hospital 17 minutes later, still wearing the clothes he'd fallen asleep in. The corridors smelled of disinfectant and death. His father Vernon was already there, collapsed in a chair outside room 327, his face buried in his hands. When Elvis approached, Vernon looked up with eyes that had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "She's gone, son. Mama's gone." Elvis walked into that hospital room and stared at the woman who had given him everything. Gladys lay still, peaceful, her hands folded across her chest. The machines were silent now. The fight was over. Elvis reached for her hand, still warm, still the hands that had sewn his first stage clothes, that had packed his lunch for school, that had applauded louder than anyone in the audience at every single performance. He whispered something that only she could hear. Then he broke down completely. For the next 6 hours, Elvis refused to leave that room. Hospital staff tried to coax him out gently, then firmly. Vernon begged him to come home, but Elvis sat in that chair, holding his mother's hand, talking to her like she could still hear him. He told her about the recording session he'd missed, about the new songs he wanted her to hear, about how sorry he was for all the times his career had taken him away from home. The media circus began immediately. By dawn, reporters had gathered outside Baptist Memorial Hospital like vultures. News vans lined Union Avenue. Radio DJs interrupted their morning shows with bulletin updates. Elvis Presley's mother has died suddenly at age 46. But inside Graceland, a different kind of crisis was unfolding. Ed Sullivan's people had been calling since 6 a.m. The Elvis appearance on Sullivan's show was scheduled for August 16th, just 2 days away. It was supposed to be Elvis's triumphant return to television after his controversial 1956 performances that had shocked conservative America. The network had invested massive amounts in promotion. Advertisers had paid premium rates. 20 million people were expected to tune in. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, found himself in an impossible position. Cancel the show and face lawsuits, furious networks, and the kind of publicity nightmare that could destroy careers. Go ahead with the show and risk exploiting a grieving son for entertainment. Parker made a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Elvis," he said, sitting across from the young man who hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken to anyone in 12 hours. "I know this is the worst possible time, but we need to talk about Sunday." Elvis looked up with eyes that seemed to belong to someone else, someone older, someone who had seen too much. "The show?" Elvis's voice was barely a whisper. "The network is saying they can rearrange things. We could postpone until—" "No." Elvis stood up slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the grounds where he and Gladys used to sit in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. "Mama would want me to honor my commitments." Parker studied Elvis's face, searching for signs of the breakdown everyone expected. Instead, he saw something else, a quiet resolve that was somehow more unsettling than grief. "You're sure, son?" Elvis nodded. "But I'm doing it my way." August 16th, 1958, CBS Studio 50, New York City. The Ed Sullivan Show was broadcasting live to the largest television audience in American history. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Word had leaked about Elvis's personal tragedy, and the entire entertainment industry was watching to see how the king would handle performing in his darkest hour. The Sullivan Show staff had prepared for every possibility. They had counselors standing by, backup plans if Elvis couldn't finish, even ambulances on standby. What they weren't prepared for was what actually happened. Elvis walked onto that stage looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. The famous smile was gone. The hip-swiveling confidence that had made him a star seemed buried under a weight that was visible to everyone watching. When Ed Sullivan introduced him, the usual screaming from teenage fans in the audience was notably subdued. They could sense something was different. Then, Elvis did something unprecedented in television history. Instead of launching into his scheduled song list, he walked to the microphone, looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting to 20 million Americans, and spoke from his heart. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I sing tonight, I want to say something. 3 days ago, I lost the most important person in my life. My mother, Gladys Presley, passed away, and with her went the best part of who I am. The studio fell completely silent. Camera operators forgot to adjust their shots. Even Ed Sullivan, famous for his unflappable television presence, stood frozen in the wings. Now, some folks might wonder why I'm here tonight instead of home grieving. The truth is, my mama raised me to honor my commitments, to keep my word, and to use whatever gifts the good Lord gave me to bring a little joy to people's lives. She's probably up there right now, making sure I don't embarrass the family name. A soft laugh rippled through the audience, mixed with something that sounded like collective heartbreak. I'm going to sing for you tonight, but I'm really singing for her. Because she never missed a chance to tell me how proud she was, and I want to make sure she stays proud, wherever she is now. What followed was unlike anything Elvis had ever done before. He sang "Love Me Tender" with a vulnerability that stripped away every trace of the rebel image that had made him famous. His voice cracked twice during the second verse. Tears flowed freely down his face. The teenage girls in the audience weren't screaming. They were crying along with him. When the song ended, the silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Then came applause that wasn't the usual frenzied fan reaction, but something deeper, something respectful, something that acknowledged they had witnessed a man transforming his grief into art. But Elvis wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," he said, walking back to the microphone. "For everyone out there who's ever lost someone they loved, who's ever wondered if the pain will ever stop, I want you to know something my mama taught me. Love doesn't die when people do. It just finds new ways to live." He paused, looking directly into the camera with an intensity that made 20 million viewers feel like he was speaking personally to them. "She's not gone. She's in every note I sing, every kindness I show, every time I remember to be grateful for what I have, instead of grieving for what I've lost. That's how love works. It doesn't end. It just changes form." The broadcast ended with Elvis singing a gospel song that wasn't on any playlist, "Precious Lord, Take My Hand." No hip movements, no showmanship, just a young man singing to his mother's memory with a voice that carried the weight of genuine loss and the promise of eventual healing. The impact was immediate and profound. NBC's phone lines were flooded with calls from viewers who had never seen Elvis as anything more than a controversial entertainer. Letters poured into CBS from mothers who thanked Elvis for showing their sons how real men handle grief. Religious leaders who had condemned his music found themselves praising his faith and character. But the most telling response came from an unlikely source. Frank Sinatra, who had publicly criticized Elvis's music as a threat to American values, sent a telegram that night. "Kid, you showed more class in 15 minutes than most entertainers show in their entire careers. Your mother raised you right." Years later, television critics would call it one of the most powerful moments in broadcasting history. Not because of any technical innovation or entertainment value, but because it showed 20 million Americans something they had never seen before. authentic vulnerability from a public figure who could have hidden behind his image but chose truth instead. Elvis never spoke publicly about that performance again. When asked about it in interviews, he would simply say, "I was talking to Mama." Those close to him noticed that something had changed that night. The rebellious edge that had defined his early career gave way to something deeper, more thoughtful, more aware of the responsibility that came with his influence. He began dedicating songs to his mother at every concert. He started visiting children's hospitals without publicity, spending hours with sick kids, telling them the same thing he had told America: love doesn't die, it just changes form. The Elvis who walked off that Ed Sullivan Show stage was different from the one who had walked on. He had learned that the greatest performances aren't about entertaining audiences. They're about sharing truth so honestly that it helps others carry their own burdens a little easier. In the years that followed, as Elvis's career reached heights that made him the most famous entertainer in the world, he never forgot the lesson of that August night. Fame was temporary. Images were constructed. But love, real love, the kind his mother had shown him, that was eternal. The tears he shed on national television weren't a sign of weakness. They were proof that beneath the rhinestone jumpsuits and Vegas lights lived a man who understood what mattered most. A man raised by a woman who had taught him that strength isn't about hiding your pain, it's about transforming it into something beautiful. That night, Elvis Presley didn't just perform for 20 million Americans. He showed them how to grieve with dignity, how to honor the dead while continuing to live, and how to find meaning in the midst of devastating loss. Gladys Love Presley died on August 14, 1958. But her influence lived on in every song her son sang, every kindness he showed, every moment he chose authenticity over image. And America was never quite the same.